Thanks for joining me today. Go ahead and introduce yourself, what distillery you're with, and your title and all that fun stuff, and then we'll get going.
Awesome. So I am Lauren Patz. I'm the head distiller for Spirit Works Distillery in Sebastopol, California, and I've been with the company for about 7 years. I started out as the tasting room manager and apprentice distiller, and there were only 4 of us on the team at that time. And fast forward 7 years later, and I've worked my way up that ladder and to become head of production and the distillery floor and things like that. And I think we have about 10 employees now.
Okay.
There's a larger number of us now than there was back then as well.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it is good. It's nice to see things change. I always have kind of a soft place in my heart for the tasting room, and so it's nice to see that kind of flourish. When I started, it was still under the regulation that we couldn't sell bottles. We couldn't even do paid tastings.
Right.
So it was essentially a marketing expense when I started here, and we were just pouring free samples in the tasting room, and then did some t-shirts and things like that.
Right.
But then, about a year into my time here, we could do paid tastings, and that felt incredible. And then another year or so after that is when we got the ability to be able to sell bottles, and that really changed the game for craft distilleries in California for sure.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I'm not well up on all of the changes from the ABC over the last couple of years, but it feels like there's been some significant ones that have really changed the face of distilling in California, and accessibility and
Absolutely.
And obviously we can see how even in current situations how much the laws have changed, and I'm really curious to see what stays and what goes, when this is all done. It'll be interesting to see what's continued to be allowed. So, but yeah, it's always fun to be a part of that bigger journey for sure.
Yeah, it's been really incredible to kind of have the opportunity to be a part of that growth and that success, and feel like a contributor to the overall brand and its ability for recognition in market and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's good.
So how did you find this passion for distilling? I mean, it's a very, I think, distinct thing to do. It's you don't kind of just fall into it. You probably have to really actively make that choice.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think for a lot of craft distillers, there's still, it's kind of still a little bit of that Wild West mentality. It's people who have this passion, and so they come from all walks of life. And so people really do, kind of fall into it because it's something that they are infatuated with, excited about, passionate about. And I feel like that was a similar path that I kind of followed. I grew up in St. Helena in Napa Valley, and my parents had a winery. So food and beverage has always been a big part of my life and things like that. So I've always been peripherally kind of adjacent to what that industry was like. And familiar with it. But I'd say my big aha moment of when I was yep, spirits, I'm interested, is I was working at Cho Chocolate when it was still on the Embarcadero in San Francisco. Yeah. And while I was there, I had the amazing job of being a pairing specialist. So I would pair chocolate with wine and cheese and beer. And I still remember one tasting that I did was with Hudson whiskey. Actually, it was at an event at Wingtip in San Francisco. Okay. Which is super cool. And we were doing a pairing of chocolate and whiskey, and I had done all of this research into how to taste whiskey, experience it, get the most out of that. And when I really had that chance to kind of slow down and taste whiskey as opposed to just drinking it, flavor just opened up, and it was like a whole new world. That's the
time to change back.
Yeah. For sure. So it was like a very clear moment for me that went from being able to taste to actually, as opposed to drinking. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that's great that you're able to kind of see that progression too. You know, that you can be able to kind of like know when your aha moment was, when the light bulb clicked, which is fun. You filled out a questionnaire before we hopped on, and I'm really curious to learn more about, I'm going to say it incorrectly, pastis?
Pastis.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm familiar with absinthe,
Right.
but tell me more about pastis.
Pastis is kind of like a similar spirit. Its main flavor profile is anise, or licorice, as most people would recognize that flavor. So I'd say still somewhat of a controversial flavor profile in the United States as to whether people are on board or not. It can be quite polarizing. It has a much lower alcohol by volume content than absinthe does. Absinthe is kind of known for being very strong, and then of course you're adding water to it. But pastis kind of starts off at a lower volume, and then of course you're usually adding water to that. So this kind of lifestyle of drinking it, I mean, I'm imagining like French Riviera, out in the nice warm sun. You've got like your ice cube in your pastis. And it's kind of like this relaxed day drinking culture that I just find really attractive, and I love licorice. So I'm all about it.
It's been a taste that I've acquired more as I've gotten older. I was not a black licorice fan young by any means, and as a candy, I'm still not a fan. As a flavor, I do enjoy it. Like I really enjoy star anise. I enjoy fennel. I enjoy like the natural flavors of licorice. And in my first experience with absinthe was, I must have been in my early 20s. And so that was like and it was very foreign to me. So, you know, like it was fun to like watch that experience, like the actual like cocktail creation experience with it. And so, having maybe a little bit of a less robust licorice flavor would probably be pretty enjoyable.
It's still fairly robust. It's just not quite highly alcoholic.
Intoxicating.
But it has a similar like louging effect, or louching as some people call it. So it goes opaque once you start adding water to it, like absinthe tends to do. And that's always part of the fun.
I think that's one. It's always fun to watch that transformation. It makes it kind of mystical in a sense. But do you know if anybody makes that here in the States?
Craft producers, I can't off the top of my head, and I feel bad because I think there was one person in Southern California who was making pastis. But pastis is similar to absinthe in that it has kind of it's a difficult flavor to remove out of your still. And so oftentimes distilleries that are making a good amount of absinthe or pastis will have either a dedicated still or specific production process or cleaning process in place in order not to have cross-contamination of those products. So
definitely not something you want to like send off in your bottle of bourbon.
Of course not. Yeah, exactly. It's such a distinct flavor, and it tends to be very strong. And so, you're kind of trying to protect the rest of your portfolio by keeping it somewhat removed. But I can't think, and I feel horrible, but I can't think of any craft producers that are making it currently, although I'm sure there are.
Well, something fun to look into for later.
For sure.
So you mentioned you kind of have a food and beverage background, and so being someone from that same background, I can attest to where finding inspiration in those places. But you kind of said like food is your inspiration. So what about food?
Well, I think anytime that you're experiencing new flavors or kind of new textures, or it becomes part of this catalog in your brain, and sometimes those things are associated with emotions or experiences, and they really kind of help recall a story as well. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about, is like I like to have the widest breadth of exposure to those different types of experiences through the form of flavor and taste and smell and all of that kind of stuff. in order to continue to add to that library of flavor profiles that I can then draw upon and see, interesting, fun connections between those two things or
Right.
multiple things and that kind of stuff. So I'm very open and like very adventurous, I guess I would say, when it comes to food and spirits.
Yeah. So what is the most recent addition to the Spirit Works lineup? I feel like I saw a bottle pop up on your guys' Instagram page the other day, and I was like, oh, what is that?
Yes. So the most recent is bourbon, and so that just came out maybe a week or so ago, and we're doing minimum 4 years aged, and it's a 4-grain bourbon. So we do 2 different mash bills, so both of which are 60% corn, 30% raw grain, and then 10% malted grain. So only one of the 2 mash bills has a malted barley. The other is a malted rye.
Okay.
So the rye forward mash bill is corn, raw rye, and rye malt. And then the other is a wheated bourbon. So corn, raw wheat, and then malted barley. And so those get blended together in order to create something really harmonized and very balanced and kind of a little bit more complex in flavor profile, and then proofed down and put into bottle for everyone to enjoy.
Fun.
You guys can go ahead. You just do the thing. It'll be fine. She'll edit it later. Yeah, exactly.
It's reality. It's work. It's
reality.
Totally fine.
It's just, what I thought might be kind of cool is like at some point if you could like meet each of the team. Just
I'd love that. I'd love for them to come say hi. So is this newest item out in stores currently, or just because of the timing did it get held back?
This is the time it was supposed to be released, but it's had like a much softer release because of the COVID-19 situation. So it actually went out to our club members first.
Okay.
And so they already had their pickup, which was the first weekend in March. And so they already got to pick up the bourbon. So it's out there circulating. And then what we do is for like club special releases, we have like a month of time where it's just club accessible, and then it gets released to the general public. But bourbon is extra exciting because it's the first SKU that we've added to market as opposed to just coming out of the tasting room.
Right.
So since I think it's been almost 4 or 5 years since we've added an actual SKU in market, meaning that like it's part of our core lineup and we'll always have it available. So we have a continuous flow of bourbon from this point on.
Oh, that's really exciting. I'm a bourbon fan, and so having that added is an exciting addition.
Really pleased with it. It was one of the first. It was one of the first recipes, the first projects that I had the chance to kind of be involved with, be a part of, and kind of build that structure around. And so it's been really fun to see it kind of come out and people taste it and what their experience and reaction is to that, for sure.
Yeah, watching that kind of, concept, birth, growth, all of that. It's a really exciting process to watch and be a part of. I totally get that. And so that's awesome. But it's you got to have your hands really on it from start to finish.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. So what else have you been up to during these times? I know you guys are currently working, which is great. What cocktails are you crafting at home, or what are you drinking?
I think all of us, this project that we're currently working on has a lot of fresh citrus involved in it. And so we've been inundated with citrus. So there's been a lot of margaritas. There's been a lot of gin and tonics, daiquiris, things like that, because we just have so much fresh citrus that we're trying to work through, because it's just the zest that we are
that you guys are just using.
Yeah, so there's just like a lot of fresh juice for us to kind of move through. So like mimosas, all kinds of fun stuff like that.
Fun. Very nice.
Pretty much anything with citrus juice in it, we've been tackling head on.
Nice.
And tasting. And we had last year we made our first rum, so we've been using some of that to.
I don't think I knew that.
It's not released yet. It's
Okay.
We just did kind of a one-off. We had some sugar laying around, and so we did a sugar mash, and we're going to be doing a Navy strength rum. So that should be coming out sometime this summer.
Fun.
And so we've been making some fun daiquiris with that, and all kinds of neat stuff for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
So actually, tell me, what is the full Spirit Works lineup?
Absolutely. So I like to think of it as kind of our lineup builds progressively on top of itself. So we make, of course, our grain to glass vodka, which is a wheat-based vodka, and it has this very full texture to it. It has like a lot of viscosity and a good amount of flavor, even though we are achieving 95% alcohol off of the still. So still very clean distillate, but because it's only going through once, it has some of that character coming through. And that is really recognizable in the spirits that it acts as the base for. So that vodka is what we use for the base for the gin. So we do a secondary distillation with our gin botanicals with that vodka, that base spirit, in order to extract flavor out that way for our gin. And then that gin is what we use to either put into barrel for barrel gin, or we add sloes to in order to do a slow maceration for the slow gin. So sloe gin is a traditional British liqueur. It's purple, it's sweet, and I'd say it's one of the things we're most known for because I believe we're still the only makers of traditional style sloe gin in the United States, meaning that we make it from fruit instead of like a concentrate or a syrup.
Wow, really cool. I was actually going to ask you to like dig into what sloe gin was, because I am not familiar with the spirit. But I'm excited to make a cocktail with it because it's so beautiful. And I was wondering, like, does it have a sweeter flavor profile, or does it have a more like gin forward flavor profile?
It's definitely, I would say, fruit and sweet forward, but our style of sloe gin, since I've kind of like took over some of the things on the production floor, I've been adding slightly less and less sugar to it.
Nice.
Very, very English style sloe gin is extraordinarily sweet, very cloyingly sweet. And so by pulling back some of that sweetness, it really gives a lot more versatility to the spirit. So it's used mostly as a modifier here in the United States. In the UK, they drink it like a port or a digestif. But in the United States, it's used mostly as a modifier for cocktails. And because of that, I didn't want to limit what other things bartenders could add and things like that. So by making it a little bit less sweet, they can still add simple syrups or another liqueur or something like that without tipping the scales balance-wise in their cocktail recipe.
Nice, very nice.
And it lets some of the more like plum flavor come to the top. So it has this really bright kind of cranberry pomegranate flavor to it.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
Very refreshing.
It is. It also just makes things fun because it's such a pretty color.
Yeah, it is.
So for cocktails, it is really fun to play with for sure.
Cool. Well, I'll definitely have to get creative with it.
Absolutely.
So tell me, I know you guys have a few other items in your lineup.
I got distracted.
That's okay.
All right. So vodka, gin, barrel gin, sloe gin, and then we actually do a barrel-aged version of the sloe gin, which I think we're the only people in the world that do a barrel-aged sloe gin. So it kind of gives it like a richer, more velvety texture and flavor, and kind of has some oxidation on it. So it does have a more like prune and rich flavor, as opposed to like the brighter cranberry flavor of the fresh sloe gin. And then we do have our whiskeys. So we do a wheat whiskey, which is 100% wheat. And then we also do a rye whiskey, which is a high rye. So 70% rye, 30% malted barley. And then of course our newest addition, which is the bourbon. Again, pretty excited to have that out in market now too.
Yeah, that's really exciting.
Yeah.
Well, you had mentioned bartenders. So what are some of your favorite local watering holes?
Well, I mean, I gotta say, I am horrible at making cocktails. Like, I am actually really bad at it. And so I am always like out of control impressed by bartenders and like what they're capable of doing. I'd say one of my favorite places to go, because they're just so they just blow my mind every time, is Duke's in
Yeah, they're
Healdsburg.
great.
I mean, just incredible works of art coming out of there, and things like that. Also, I like to go to Girl in the Fig because they have a really lovely pastis and absinthe selection.
Oh, nice.
And they have that nice patio area so that you can kind of sit out there and recreate this image that I have in my head.
Yeah, very Parisian afternoon.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I love Whitechapel just because I think gin, I would say, is probably my favorite spirit out there. I mean, I love whiskey, but gin, I think, has such a wide breadth of flavor profiles. It's really fun to taste and experience gin that way. And then Play in San Francisco as well, and they have an incredible aquavit selection, which aquavit is, I'd say, close second to gin for me, but only because there's just less of it out there.
Sure.
Yeah,
I'm not overly familiar with the flavor profile of aquavit. I know its name, I know roughly, its origins, but I don't actually think I've ever had it. So I'll have to, I know Play has, I think, fairly extensive list. So I'll have to take myself to San Francisco, hopefully one day soon, and try that out.
Yes, we actually released an aquavit as a special release this year. It's something I've been desperate to make for so long, and it's caraway is the main flavor component, which is another one of those semi-polarizing flavors.
Yeah, you really enjoy caraway or you do not, and I luckily do.
Yeah, has kind of I almost think of it as in the same realm as cardamom in that it plays both savory and sweet. And has a really interesting, not necessarily medicinal, but it can get there depending on how much of it you're using.
Yeah.
But I love caraway. We talk about inspiration from food. The inspiration for that aquavit was a soda bread that I had. Had caraway in it, and I was like, this is the best flavor I've ever experienced, and I couldn't place it because it was so quote unquote foreign to me, because it's just not in a lot of the food that I was eating.
Not in our everyday menu by any means, for sure. Well, awesome. That's so much fun. So if someone wanted to pick up Spirit Works in the current climate, they are currently available at local retailers. Yes, local retailers. And I think we're still kind of figuring out what our next steps are. Because we're doing a significant amount of production right now. We're trying to limit the amount of access that we have to everybody else. But shipping is a potential possibility at this stage. And so Spirit Works has always been a big believer in making sure to really do things as right as we possibly can. So tend to be a little bit cautious about decision making in that realm. But I'm sure we'll see some changes within the next couple of weeks. But yeah, for now, retailers for sure. Okay, perfect. Well, that's good to know. I'll make sure to highlight that as we get all this information out.
Yeah.
What else is on here for us to chat about? So many good things. This was what would be advice if someone wanted to get into distilling? What is your advice that you would give them?
So I think it's a great question, and I'd say there's a couple of things that I would suggest. One is to just drop an email at a distillery that you might be familiar with or might be close to where you're living, and just ask if they need help. We've hired 3 people that way.
Great
people
advice.
are just kind of taking initiative and saying, can I come in, that kind of thing. Spirit Works does an apprenticeship / internship program for 3 months, and it's honestly kind of like a feeder into our production staff. So one of our current employees here is just finished on this Saturday. She just finished her internship, and now she's coming on as a full-time employee with us.
Congratulations to her.
Yes, exactly. But I think it's similar to any kind of craft thing. You have to kind of start from the bottom and work your way up, unless you already have a significant amount of experience underneath your belt. So it is it's a production position, and that means that you're going to get compensated like it's a production position, and so you just have to be willing and allow that to be part of your lifestyle, and
Right.
really understand that this is a passion, and that's what's going to see you through more than anything else. You work long hours, you live here essentially, that kind of thing.
You're hauling heavy bags of grain,
totally,
all of that stuff.
Totally. And also, if you don't enjoy cleaning on some level, you're not cut out to be.
Not for you.
Yeah, not for you. You have to like really embrace that.
I mean, you gotta like get into that still and like hose it out and sterilize it, all that stuff. Yeah. That's a really good point. I've never thought of it like that.
Well, I mean, I feel like distillers are just kind of like glorified janitors, and the majority of our job is just moving something from one container to another container in some way, and then cleaning the path that follows.
For sure. Definitely clean as you go process, for sure. And so with that, right, like there's a pretty robust community within the distilling community, within beverage, within food and beverage, within Sonoma County. And so, you know, what is something that you enjoy most about this community?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that there is a better industry than food and beverage. I mean, it's all about hanging out and having a good time.
Yeah.
Also, people who know how to work hard, who enjoy being around other people. Hospitality is such a big part of that experience that we all create together for enjoying and kind of like appreciating the finer things in life, or really just appreciating life, I feel like is what food and beverage is about.
Yeah, so I think that's great. I mean, I like it because it brings people together. It's creating an experience to create a memory. I think that's, you know, and then you get to create it in Sonoma County. I mean, that's kind of hard to beat.
Yeah, it is.
Or Napa County, wherever, you know,
for sure.
Same,
but there's just there is so much, I think, especially in the Bay Area, so much communal passion for quality and excitement around creativity and development and kind of pushing maybe some typical boundaries there. I'd say as a whole, I'd say probably the craft cocktail industry has been like that, and like really open arms for unique products and you know, a huge part of education for the general, you know, population, and what the different flavor profiles can offer, and explore that kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I'd love to meet your team if they're available.
They're just finishing up.
Awesome.
Hey, Crystal. Come here. I'm gonna go say hi. So this is Crystal. She's our secondary distiller, and then Emma and Tyler. So this is the whole production staff here.
Awesome. Nice to meet you guys.
Yeah. You too. They've been working hard. They've been exercising what we've been talking about, that cleaning.
Yeah.
We try to keep a clean space, and they're the ones responsible for making us all look good. So
nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Just cleaning up my messes. Awesome.
Nice to meet you guys. Well, I'm looking forward. Next week, we're going to hop on and do a tour and tasting.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to that. Talk to you later, Lauren.
Bye.
Bye.